Madame Maupertuis, vous êtes là? Nous pouvons tester votre connexion encore une fois? S'il vous plaît, si vous êtes là, presse sur Raise Hand. C'est la base de la fenêtre.
Désolée, mais je n'entends pas.
Do you have a...
Είμαστε έτοιμοι, Πρόεδρε. Are we ready?
Yes, we are ready.
Interpreters? Everything is going well with our online participants? Good. Let's start now with our workshop on cohesion policy and entrepreneurship in islands. Before giving the floor to our distinguished delegates, I would like really to pay a tribute to this institution, the European Economic and Social Committee, which since 20 years now, even when headquarters was in Place Ravenstein, supported us, supported INSULEUR, and facilitated our works and our meetings here in Brussels. Different names come in my mind since then that really helped us, to have all these facilities in the EESC. Is President Henri Malos, was president at the moment, Pierre-Jean Coulon, George Dassis, and now President Stefano Mallia from Malta. Two of them, Stefano Mallia and Henri Malos, were members of our chamber's community. Now, I give the floor first to Stefano Mallia, who is hosting us, and he is online. Stefano, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, George.
Good
morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, George. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to all the delegates of INSULEUR, and good morning, especially good morning to you, George, and to Joe, my compatriot and friend, and also to Mr. Chekaoglu. I hope I got that correct because it's not exactly the easiest. But indeed, it's I'm very pleased to see you there, and it's a pity that I could not attend physically because I would have loved to be able to attend this meeting physically. But having said that, what is most important is that, as you said, George, that we have a long-standing relationship, and that indeed the European Economic and Social Committee can continue to support you in the work that you carry out. Work which, of course, myself coming from an island, it's work which I very much appreciate. As you have mentioned, George, I too come from the chamber family. Indeed, I was president of my chamber some years ago, of the Chamber of Commerce of Malta. And indeed, I always say that my first full-time professional job was indeed when I was engaged with the Chamber of Commerce. So I feel very much at home in your organization, and also very much at home with your agenda. Just as a way of introduction, also about a bit myself and from where I'm coming from, I am president of the Employers Group in the European Economic and Social Committee. I've been president of the Employers Group now for basically a year and a half. And the Employers Group within the European Economic and Social Committee has about 106 members. We come from all the 27 different member states, and we come directly either from business, like myself. I come from a firm which is in the financial services field. And we also have members who come directly from business organizations, business associations, indeed, such as chambers of commerce. And we represent about 20 million enterprises right across the whole of the EU. In carrying out our work, clearly our work is to push the employer's agenda, but this is not an exclusive agenda, because it is an agenda which should interest everyone, because our agenda is growth, our agenda is economic well-being, and it is also creation of employment. So I think these are all agenda items which I'm sure interest everyone. We work very closely in Brussels, but also with partner organizations. We have some partner organizations with whom we work very closely in terms of agenda, in terms of activities which we carry out, in terms of also discussions which we undertake. And some of them are clearly Euro Chambers. We also have Business Europe, Eurocommerce, Copa-Cogeca, SME United, and SGI Europe. So these are our formal and official partner organizations. Coming to the topic of your workshop today, it's clear that we are still struggling with the fallout of the COVID pandemic. And however, just as we thought that we could start to a road to, let's say, a stable and sustainable recovery, clearly we now have been hit with all the consequences, with all the negative consequences of the war in Ukraine. When you look at the economic forecast, which the Commission issued last week, it's clear that the European economy is facing headwinds, and indeed the forecast for economic growth is very weak, and also, unfortunately, it will be accompanied by high inflation. So clearly there is a lot to be done, and for us, the clear priority has to be boosting and supporting entrepreneurship and competitiveness right across the EU. So this is and will continue to be our key priority moving forward. And this is where indeed the topic of your workshop today, cohesion policy, comes into play, because cohesion policy is a fundamental pillar in also pushing forward the objective which I just mentioned. In 2019, I was rapporteur for the committee, for the European Economic and Social Committee, on the opinion which was titled "The Future of Cohesion Policy in the Post-2020 Period." And this was pre-COVID, and of course before the war in Ukraine. And I had carried out this opinion together with Mr. Vada-Castañez, who I know will be participating in your event today, and to whom I send my very best and warmest regards. And there I'd like to just mention 3 points which we had mentioned already concerning cohesion policy. Number one was that cohesion policy has to adopt a regionally differentiated approach when it comes to investments and policy responses. So what we're saying is that a territorially more tailored approaches which would support the most isolated and sparsely populated areas, and of course, because of our agenda, very important, including islands. The second point is that we had said in this opinion was that cohesion funds should be used to provide a better framework for startups, entrepreneurs, and innovative SMEs, and to support family businesses more effectively. All very critical elements of the economy. And the third point which we had raised was that the regulatory package governing the programming periods have to be simpler and have to avoid the trap, I would say, or temptation of micromanaging the funds. To us, it is clear that reducing unnecessary regulatory burdens, especially for SMEs, and promoting competitiveness and entrepreneurship in Europe have to be the key priorities, were also our key priorities in the context of the Conference on the Future of Europe. I'm sure you are aware of this initiative which took place over the past 12 months. In fact, it came to a close on the 9th of May. During this conference, they call it a conference, but it was a series of meetings, a number of very intense meetings in which our group, the employers group, and indeed the committee as a whole, the European Economic and Social Committee, was involved, together with other social partners and most importantly with citizens. And here, the conclusions of this conference account for about 49 objectives, I believe, and about 320 measures which have now been put forward following these discussions. And here, as employers group, of course, we pushed and promoted employer agenda items to complement what citizens were asking for. Because clearly, when putting on the hat of a citizen, I understand completely the logic where citizens were asking for better education, better health system, housing, better income, and of course, better quality environments. All very, very logical and all very valid. But in our view, accompanying these, let's say, requests from citizens, there must also be measures which help us to have a strong and sustainable economy, because we believe firmly that if you have a strong economy, you have economic well-being, and that economic well-being then will allow us to address the issues which I just mentioned, which were environment, housing, education, etc. And here in the Conference on the Future of Europe, just to mention 3 points which we are pleased are also in the conclusions. One is that there will be a drive by the EU institutions to promote an entrepreneurial culture which will create the economic environment where innovative businesses of all sizes can start up and also thrive, and also participate in funding and also procurement, public procurement. We also introduced in the conclusions the concept of a competitiveness check, where we are insisting that before any new legislation is introduced, there should be a competitiveness check undertaken to ensure that any new legislation does not impact negatively our companies, our businesses, especially SMEs. And also, we refer to the situation of brain drain, especially for those regions which are lagging behind. And I think this is also an issue of concern or of interest for INSULEUR and indeed for its members. Of course, now, in fact, I will be moving to a meeting exactly on the follow-up of these conclusions. Now, what is important from the social partners' point of view, from the Economic Committee's point of view, is to see how we're going to follow up, how the EU institutions will follow up on the conclusions and on the demands which were made in the final document. Having said that, I would like to conclude by thanking you all for, first of all, for setting up this meeting. Secondly, for asking me to address you. And indeed, I look forward to receiving the conclusions from your workshop today. Once again, thank you and good luck in the work that you will be carrying out over today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano, for this very interesting introduction. We are really proud of your work. We are proud of that you are now in the presidency of the Group 1, and I would like to thank you really for all facilities, especially interpretation that you offer to us, and we can, let's say, contribute to your works a little bit.
Thank you very much, George, and I wish you a very good day.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, Stefano. And we hope we will have you, in our next forum in Gran Canaria.
I look forward to that. So the earlier you give me the dates, I will be able to hopefully manage that. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Ciao.
good.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Now I give the floor to Mr. Eleftherios Kechagioglou, an old friend of us, and then we have, a very strong cooperation with the small Greek islands and the Federation of the European Small Islands. And Eleftherios is always, ready to respond to all our requests, including this one. So thank you, Eleftherios. You have the floor.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, President. First of all, I would like to thank you for the excellent cooperation and support that small Greek islands and small European islands have had from your network. We believe that entrepreneurship is one of the pillars for small islands. And I think we find three important keywords in your title: cohesion, the word tool, and entrepreneurship. Allow me to go back to our school days and equations. The first equation that I'd like to show you is that if we want to have entrepreneurship in islands, we need to improve the standard of living. And in order to do that, we need rules for development. And in order to have proper rules for development, we need to take into account the specificities of small islands. And I'm using the definition of a small island used by the European Federation. And I would repeat that: specific rules and regulations, laws and regulations for small islands. Let me give you two specific examples. Petrol for cars. We are all experiencing the consequences of the war in Ukraine, of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and I'm comparing here the price of petrol in three areas: in a big urban center, and a big island, and a small island. In big capitals, in a city, and I'm referring to Athens here, the price is around 190. In the big islands is approximately 205, and in a small island, petrol in euros per liter is €2.60. Now, it has been impossible for the state to tackle this problem, regardless of any policy measures they've tried. Now, the second issue that I wanted to bring up as an example is the issue of Airbnb. Now, it was quite clear that in the big urban centers, Airbnb was bringing advantages and had a positive impact. In small islands and in islands in general, the impact has started to shift. In the beginning, it was positive, but now we have to face huge challenges. It has become very difficult to find a home, and this applies both to residents who are trying to build up a new life and start a family in the island, and to public servants, employees, people who want to come to the island to work. So we are coming to the conclusion that state intervention is needed only on this point. I think we share a common language, all of us here in this room, and we all understand that there is a big difference between a big island and a small island, and unfortunately this is not necessarily understood at EU institution level. We are all listening to the European Parliament and other institutions saying that they want to support islands, but not really understanding their specificities. And they are waiting this from our side. For example, in a big island in Ireland will not have the same problems as Galway. The same will apply to a comparison between the smallest island in the Dodecanese, Tilos, and Rhodes Island. The same would apply to a small island in the Adriatic in Croatia and Zagreb. So we're seeing this across the board in the entire European Union. And it seems that the United Kingdom, Italy, and Greece have started to understand this specificity. But this is not enough. We need stable, transparent rules, laws and regulations for small islands. First of all, we need to define what is a small island and where is the limit. In the EU, we have a range between 100 residents to 25,000 residents. And of course, the definition of a resident is also a gray zone. And the concerns and the specificities of a small island need to be taken into account right from the beginning. They should not be an afterthought. It should not be something that the government is trying to solve after taking the broader political measures and trying to slightly change them for small islands. No, we need to have a framework right from the beginning, being set by the European Commission and the European Parliament, and setting out specific laws and regulations for small islands right from the beginning. Thank you very much for the opportunity you've given me to address your network. I will be participating to our discussions, and thank you once again.
Ευχαριστούμε τον κύριο Κεχαγιόγλου.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kehayoglu. You're always to the point, very precise in describing the situation and formulating proposals. Lefteris, over the past 20 years, when we've been following this adventure in the EU, we always had the issue of defining, of understanding, of speaking and using the term island. I think that some EU institutions in the past had been allergic to the use of the term small island or island even. Fortunately, the situation has changed thanks to the work of INSULEUR, thanks to the work of other people like Claudia, from whom we'll be hearing later on. I think that now there is an understanding, and the European Commission is making specific proposals for islands, and I will hope that we will hear something along these lines from the representative of the European Commission. And let's hope that we will hear proposals tailored to the needs of small islands. We need to protect small islands. What kind of entrepreneurship are we envisaging in an island inhabited by 50 people? What you really need to do is protect these 50 people. You need to protect the presence of residents in that island. You need to work on welfare. The government needs to send doctors and teachers to such a very small island. This is my starting point. This is a position that our network has always tried to promote. Mr. Kehayoglu, let me give you another example on business life and entrepreneurship. There is the island of Castellorizo, which is right in on a straight line connecting the exclusive economic zone of the European Union. You can start from the northern, the point at the further north of the EU to the point at the south of the EU. On a straight line, you will have to pass through that island. You're very right in pointing this out. We should also not forget that the islands are precisely on the external borders of the European Union. There is a geographical area, an arc formed by these islands, and the European Union needs to address the specific challenges and needs to foster the development of this region, not only with respect to business life, but also to tax policy and many other policies. Now, I think it is the time to hear from our president, Mr. Borg.
I again also want to thank Stefano and Eleftherios, who have spoken before me. Good morning to all. I again extend my greetings to all those who are present here physically, and also to all those who are following us virtually, in a virtual manner. I believe today we are discussing an important topic for INSULEUR. Cohesion policy as a tool to boost and support entrepreneurship on islands. I would like, of course, to thank again, first of all, the European Economic and Social Committee, and more specifically Mr. Mallia, Stefano Mallia, for the assistance provided in the run-up to this event. I would also like to thank the organizations who are cooperating with us today: the European Small Islands Network and the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions. It is important to note that the 8th Cohesion Report acknowledges the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic had an asymmetric impact on different regions. It also acknowledges the fact that long-term growth will require reforms of the public sector, an upskilled labour force, and a stronger capacity to innovate. It is an undeniable fact that the pandemic has slowed the pace of growth that the EU was experiencing prior to the pandemic. However, cohesion policy was crucial to mobilise increased funding to tackle the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 8th Cohesion Report also identifies important elements to growth, primarily, first, the need to access basic broadband, secondly, the drive to decrease air and water pollution, and thirdly, the need to address skill gaps between regions, specifically in the digital area. Moreover, entrepreneurship and innovation are identified as critical for the growth of the more disadvantaged regions. However, this does not mean that the presence of firms on the territory is enough. The same report acknowledges that the expected spillover from the firms present on the territory more often does not occur. The green and digital transition are also seen as important enablers of growth, though these would require structural changes that may in the end create further regional disparities according to the report. In my opinion, the green and digital transitions provide important opportunities for islands. The digital transition, more specifically, can help bridge the gap in terms of creating value-added industries on islands. But it is important to acknowledge that islands need to be put in the right conditions to do so. If the required structural changes do not occur, such an adequate broadband connectivity and redundancy, for example, islands would not be able to make the next step. Actually, it may lead to increasing the present divide between the mainland and islands. The green economy also presents significant potential for islands, but only when islands are used as test beds for the implementation of new technologies, and when the research is effectively conducted on islands, and there is an actual spillover of knowledge to other industries within the island territory. While the 8th Cohesion Report identifies important elements which need to be addressed, more needs to be done for islands. In its feedback to the 8th Cohesion Report, INSULEUR commented that the present tools are not enough and that there need to be incentives for islands to implement integrated territorial development strategies. An equitable distribution of funds also points out to the use of better indices which incorporate all the main dimensions of social and economic well-being. Islands have particular handicaps which need to be addressed. Their structural and geographical characteristics give rise to additional costs, which slows their development. The COVID-19 pandemic has continued to show the weak structures within islands and their severe limitations. More needs to be done, and this has to be acknowledged in the cohesion policy and in specific instruments which try to address these limitations. I am sure that today's fruitful discussion with members of the most important EU institutions and from organisations such as INSULEUR and the Conference of the Peripheral Maritime Regions, CPMR, will continue to fuel this healthy debate. This should lead us to find practical solutions which can be implemented for and on our islands. Thank you.
Thank you, President Borg, for this really important intervention. Digitalization is a real instrument for islands, especially for islands. It's a strong instrument in our contacts, and we see, the results even for our meeting here. We have a lot of participants from other islands that cannot be in Brussels, but they can, follow our works from far. Now, we had invited Josiane Koutayar from Malta to be in our second, let's say, panel, moderated by Lina Konstantinopoulou from Eurochambers, but due to a commitment, she asked to move, to make the presentation now. So I ask Josiane Koutayar to intervene.
Could please close your microphones. Only one microphone on, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the invitation today, and sorry I couldn't be physically present, but it's Green Week, and therefore it's the week where we also spend time with our constituency. And still, the online world is giving us the opportunity to be with you today and to discuss a topic which is very at heart to me: entrepreneurship in European islands. As the Vice Chair of SARICA Intergroup responsible for SMEs and digitalization, I do welcome today's workshop and discussion, as it will allow us to delve deeper into the opportunities, but also the challenges that entrepreneurs face every day in our insular regions. Coming from the island of Gozo, and also as one of the members of the European Parliament, negotiating the report on cohesion policy and EU islands, I share hopes and concerns of local stakeholders and of the chambers that are really key actors in helping local ecosystems fully unleash their potential. And here I'd like also to thank our chambers and all our local stakeholders which are on the ground with the realities and which help us policymakers to understand the realities that there are on the ground better. I also share their assessment of the current situation, and I'd like to highlight the most relevant features related to entrepreneurship. Let's say that COVID increased an already challenging situation. It has been a wake-up call for all of us in order to rethink our development model to build back not only better, but also greener and more digital. Limited local markets, high reliance on a few economic sectors, inadequate access to financial resources, the knowledge gap in terms of EU opportunities, extra costs, these are all challenges that we need to face. Indeed, doing business is not easy in general. You can imagine when you come from an island. And often local authorities do not have the resources, the adequate resources to put in place all the actions they would wish to carry out. It's also a matter of capacity building that we need to work upon. Enhancing the perspective of entrepreneurship in European islands was one of my main priorities in the negotiations for the report voted in the Regi Committee. I said it numerous times, but let me say it once more. I consider this report neither a silver bullet nor a wish list. We should in fact not overlook the many challenges that the Regi initiative outlines and which were already embedded in the resolution voted in 2016. This is the reason why I believe that this time round we need something stronger, a future pact for islands, and this is the first step to build a series of actions, akin to what has been done for the Urban Pact and the future also Rural Pact. This pact will concretely improve the conditions of citizens living and businesses operating in the insular regions of the Union. And these initiatives will necessarily have to take SMEs into considerations, not just as SMEs from islands suffer from an objective competitive disadvantage, but also amid the future developments linked to environmental transition, which is an opportunity that nevertheless embeds a series of risks for insular regions which we should strive to mitigate. One of these challenges is indeed about the effects of the Fit for 55 package on the economic, social, and territorial cohesion of our islands. Allow me to state it once again. The environmental package comes in a timely manner.
Josiane, excuse me, Josiane. Could you please put on your camera because we have also some problems for the interpreters. Thank you. Josiane?
Yes, I'm trying to put on the camera.
On the top left of your screen, there is a button that says Settings. If you click on that, you will see your audiovisual devices. Below the camera, there is a button which you can toggle to activate your camera.
Excellent.
I'll try to switch device quickly.
No, it's okay. Now we see you. It's perfect now. It's perfect.
You can see me? Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. I wasn't aware that the camera was off. Okay. So we're speaking about the importance of helping our SMEs transit when it comes also to the Fit for 55 package. And that whilst this package comes in a timely manner, because islands have the utmost interest to invest in a clean economy as soon as possible, it's also important that we help them in this regard when it comes to the challenges. What I really urge is to make this transition fit for our territories, and I am glad that the REGI report underlines that islands need tailor-made solutions as they solely rely on aviation and maritime. And it's important that we keep in mind that this is not a wish list and it's not a whim, but this is a matter of fairness. And may I add, it's a matter of social justice with our islands. Also of social justice with our entrepreneurs and businesses operating in islands on which a lot of families depend. If transport fares keep rising, we are going to sum up such a competitive disadvantage on an already disadvantageous scenario. And here I must state that apart from the impact of COVID, there is also the impact of war and the added transportation and importation costs that have been rising. And this we must keep in mind, along with, for example, the spiraling energy prices that we need to keep in mind and make sure of it that our businesses do not suffer. Let's think then about tourism as summer is approaching. Why should travelers choose our wonderful scenarios if they need to face an additional barrier to reach our coasts? Let's imagine the extra burden for enterprises active in the manufacturing sector, as they already have to cope with insular markets, which due to their limited size, cannot guarantee the same economies of scale an enterprise from the mainland can enjoy on larger markets. Then we come to digitalization and its opportunities, which could really help address insularity issues, as they will help our companies find new opportunities and overcome the geographical hurdle. The digital component can be just a part of the policy mix supporting our regions, which by the definition should refrain from adopting a one-size-fits-all approach. Yes, earlier on, a colleague stated how it's important to realize that small islands face certain challenges which are different from larger islands, and that's why it's important that we also do not adopt a one-size-fits-all approach on a European level, because whilst we need an island spec, because our diverse islands are united in their certain challenges, then we also need to give certain leeway for policymakers when it comes to the diverse situations of different islands. To make legislation then closer to the needs of the different regions, the report on islands underlines once again the importance of the introduction of territorial proofing and impact assessments of the European Commission's proposals. and this with the aim of developing targeted policies and assessing how proposed legislation would affect citizens and businesses based in the different regions. Such a provision would have also been helpful on the Fit for 55 package, and I really hope that the Commission will pay heed to our requests and go beyond the dichotomy between city and rural areas, such as that of an urban agenda and a rural pact. Reality is way more multifaceted than this, and I share your concerns about the scarce reference to insularity in the 8th report on the economic, social, and territorial cohesion released earlier this year. I hope that once plenary will put its official rubber stamp on the islands report in the upcoming Strasbourg session, the Commission will open a new, positive, proactive chapter in its relations with insular regions and its stakeholders. Opportunities are countless, and cohesion policy can give a boost to the sustainable development of islands if we will be able to combine vision with pragmatism. The transitions can result in relatively new economic sectors, contributing to enhancing the positioning of islands by building on their unique features, from circular to blue economy, from sustainable tourism to active aging. The EU should enable this change of paradigm, supporting capacity building, reducing the burden, and minimizing the risks. I'm sure that our union, if it puts its mind to it, and here where we together need to lobby, can help small businesses to think European and act locally in an effective manner, as they are a robust pillar to overcome insularity every day. The strong collaboration between the chambers and the Brussels-based institutions will contribute to strengthening the link between the EU and its islands, and it's definitely the way forward. I thank you once again for this timely discussion, and please count on my support to continue raising the islands agenda further on the EU's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, MEP Zsuzsanna Kutajer, for this, very, supportive intervention. We know that the European Parliament is with us. There are a lot of resolutions that have passed in the past, approved by the European Parliament through also the Syrica intergroup, which is, conducted by CRPM, the Commission of Islands. Thank you once again, Josiane, for your help, and you are, a real friend of Insular. Now, I give the floor to Claudia Guzon.
Thank you.
Without any comment, please.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you, INSULEUR, for inviting us, and also to the European Economic and Social Committee to host in this event. And I would also like to thank the ESIN network, with whom we recently signed a memorandum of understanding, precisely during our General Assembly 2 weeks ago. And thank you, of course, to Ms. Josiane Kutajer, that we know is a very good friend of insularity, and she somehow anticipated also what I wanted to explain a little bit today. She was also there in our General Assembly in Gotland, and she always shows her full support to our demands and our requests. Just a bit of introduction. Well, I'm an Executive Secretary of the Islands Commission of the CPMR. And actually, we are a network of 90 insular member regions, and we are one of the 6 geographical commissions of the CPMR, which is a network of around 150 regions. And what we campaign for is a balanced development across the European territory. In particular, in our case, as Island Commission, we campaign in favor of insular regions in that sense. And of course, cohesion policy, well, is one of our core policy areas and is dealt by the General Secretariat mainly, together with other policy areas. And well, the title of my contribution today is about cohesion policy and recent developments, but I like especially to focus on, let's say, the topic from an insular angle. Let's say that, well, as we know, cohesion policy is the main, the unique instrument to achieve the overall harmonious development and also to reduce disparities across the different areas of the European Union. And in that sense, well, the Article 174, which is somehow crucial for us, is of great importance for islands. And so far, let's say, we don't think that is fully applied as it should be. We have seen somehow a lack of visions from the European Union in the last, let's say, months and years for islands. And of course, as it was mentioned by Mr. Josiane Koutajar, we regret that the 8th cohesion report didn't include a mention for islands, and especially, that it didn't actually consider the disparities linked to insularity in terms of difficulties for these territories. And this is pretty disappointing, of course, but despite this whole situation, let's say that in the last months we have seen, as you were mentioning, somehow a sort of understanding, a better understanding of insularity, and also a better interest on how we can work together to, let's say, bring some issues to be heard by the European institutions. And of course, in the last months, we managed to create a sort of joint political front. So we joined forces with other networks, with our regions in particular, and it was mentioned by again by Ms. Koutajar. We also contributed to the initiative report that was recently voted in the Regi Committee, and it will be presented also in the next month in the plenary of the Parliament. So we do believe that we have, in that sense, the support from the European Parliament. In particular by the rapporteur, Mr. Omarjee, and also, by the shadows rapporteurs, including Ms. Koutajar. And as it was mentioned, what is proposed in this report is the idea of EU long-term strategy or pact for islands in line with the urban and future, let's say, rural pact. This is the aim, but our aim in particular is to, let's say, apply a sort of insular approach, so an insularization to all major EU policies. That's our aim in the long term, I would say. Of course, we also have a promising EU framework in that sense, because we know that, in particular, the future upcoming presidency of the Council will be held, let's say, by Sweden and Spain, and both these countries have islands, including in the territories. So, in the case of Spain, we are working a lot, very closely with our members, also to support this kind of initiatives during the presidency. And hopefully we believe that this could be also a push for the European Commission to help in that sense in this path. There's also one proposal in the initiative report that is about the celebration of 2024 as a European Year of Islands, and we think also this would be a good idea for once. And just to mention also what happened in the last months, between April and May, we also contributed to different raising awareness events. In particular, we kind of reiterated publicly also the need for this strategy and the need for cohesion policy to support this path for islands. In two specific events, there was a specific COR, the Committee of the Regions webinar, organized this specific event as a contribution to the conference on the future of Europe. that recently closed. And also very recently at the end of April we had this specific Sierra event on the initiative report that was also very important as a, let's say, a celebration of it was just being voted in the future plenary. And of course, in addition, we celebrated our General Assemblies as Island Commission in Gotland very recently. I can see some of our member regions that were also present, like Canary Islands. And during this event, the main focus of our General Assembly was particularly the future of EU islands and the path towards this strategy. This should be inclusive, let's say, as we wish. And all these kind of messages were somehow, let's say, summarized in our final declaration. And the aim of our declaration, in final declaration for 2022, is precisely to indicate some recommendation that should be considered for this strategy in the next years, we hope. What I can say, based on the reflections and exchanges we had also during these different events with our members during the General Assembly, well, I think there are a couple of points that should be highlighted in relation to cohesion policy and islands, of course. Well, we have noticed that indeed cohesion policy could be much more impactful and much more powerful for islands, because so far it has not, let's say, sufficiently addressed the islands' needs, in our opinion. There are also some ambition proposals, such as, for instance, the creation of a task force of a unit in DG Regio that could help in this way. Well, why? Because, of course, we know that islands are different and they need specific consideration. This is, I believe, something that we all somehow experience. Well, people living in islands in general, they have this perception. And of course, well, after COVID-19 crisis, there was a strong impact in these territories. Most of them, let's say, most vulnerable territories were islands, and this is now also put at risk again by the Ukrainian crisis for of course the repercussion that this might have in the medium and long term. And well, again, just to mention a few of other difficulties that affect islands, well, the climate change risks and the biodiversity let's say, protection as one of the core also interests of islands, I would say. What we notice is also that there's a lack of statistical data on islands, and for this reason also in our final declaration we ask for a cross-disciplinary analysis on the impact of EU sectorial policies for islands. And this should be actually the main way to set then specific provisions also for islands in terms of regulatory and funding frameworks of both ways. Just on the specific issues of relevance for today's event, so how cohesion also could support entrepreneurship. Well, there are, let's say, a couple of points that are linked to cohesion policy and the support that this kind of funding and this kind of measures could let's say, have to other kind of areas. If we speak about competitiveness, well, we know that in islands especially we normally have very poorly diversified economies that often rely on tourism as the main source of income, and there's a strong dependence also on the mainland. So what we have been also discussing with our members in general is the need for a change of mindset in terms of state aid rules in that sense, because there are additional costs for islands in terms of transport, logistics, energy, just to mention a couple. And we know that if we do not measure this kind of additional costs, we are not able also to provide proper and tailor-measured let's say, actions to overcome these issues. Another issue, of course, that is somehow linked also to entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is transport, because transport is a vital sector for islands. and it's linked to the permanent geographical situation of islands. It cannot change, let's say. And of course, we know that islands are highly dependent on a limited number of transport means, so air transport and of course, maritime transport. And I was happy to see that also in the conclusion of the conference on the future of Europe, there was a mention about connectivity and the need of connectivity for islands, which is at least something that we can be happy for. Another point is about green and digital transition, of course, that was also pointed out by Josiane Koutajar. But we know that there are structural limitations for islands, and of course we welcome the initiatives such as the Fit for 55 package and the recent Repower EU initiative as good proposals, but of course, we need to take into account that there are some limitations, as I said, and we need to ensure a just transition for the territories such as islands that are most vulnerable in that sense. And we do not want that this kind of policies create further disparities when it comes to the implementation. So that's something that also we included in our final declaration. Other points that are related to the limited, let's say, natural resources. And I think also here we should bear in mind that this is a major handicap for islands. And in some way, we need to find a way to have cohesion policy also to support this kind of need for reducing the dependence on the mainland. Somehow, and of course that was also mentioned previously by the other panelists, but structural social challenges, so the lack of skills, jobs, capacity building that was mentioned also by Ms. Koutajar. So this is something that is, of course, I think one of the key priorities when it comes to entrepreneurship, as well as the topic of tourism that was also covered as well. We know that at the moment the European Commission has launched a process about the transition pathway for tourism, and we also participated in this process by providing some recommendations for including the insular perspective. So, of course, these are all ambition goals, and we hope that the framework of a Pact for Islands could help in framing this new approach to islands. And we need to join forces, so it's good that we can start this cooperation with all other networks that are working in the same way. And just to conclude, we know that islands are home to approximately 20 million inhabitants in the EU. So I think the European Union in general cannot neglect this kind of issue. So that's it from my side, and thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. First, that you traveled to be with us today,
a pleasure.
In person. Just to say that we are totally in agreement with your remarks. Insular, I think we have also the same objectives, and we are happy that you are there and you lead a little bit this boat, in this holistic approach, with this holistic approach. Thank you, really.
Thank you.
And we will keep, in touch for any effort, common effort, and common, initiative in the future. Now, we are a little bit out of the program, and we have, persons that are waiting for the President of the Corsican government, Parliament, Mrs. Nanette Maupertuis. So, may I ask our experts, insular experts, to speak for 10 minutes, both, not each, both. Just to keep, the main points in your presentation. Irini first.
Can we go forward with the presentation? I'm going to pass. It will be easy because Ms. Guzon covered almost all of the points. I need it in a view.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, please. First slide. No problem. Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna. Do you want me to? How can I? Okay, you will need to go forward with them. Okay.
Ειρήνη μου, ένα λεπτό.
Ναι, αλλά πρέπει να αρχίσουμε. Ναι. I'm going to just remind the importance of SMEs for our European economy as they're part of every value chain in EU economy. They represent some 99% of all EU enterprises. They account for more than half of Europe's GDP, and they account for 2/3 of private jobs as they employ 100 million people. And cohesion policy is the largest source of EU support for them. Next slide, please. So why it's... Well, I'm not going to go through this because Claudia mentioned all the points of the geographical handicaps that are mentioned in Article 174. I'm not going to go through also the graphics that show why it's important for insular SMEs. So we can go to the next one, please. We can go ahead, yeah. So we were talking about the competitive disadvantage. You've covered all points. I'm just going to insist a little bit more because, yes, islands have handicaps, but there are also lands of opportunities. And this, maybe we can insist a bit on this. If we can go to the next slide. They are, in fact, test beds for the deployment of innovative technologies addressing real-life challenges, and they are also excellent laboratories for technical innovation in the fields of energy, particularly in renewable energy sources and energy efficiency, transport, mobility, but also sustainable tourism. And they are also, they export niche products guaranteeing the island's place in some markets with high added value. It's important to note as well that these lands of opportunities, as I like to call them, are also reminded in the new Euromed Interreg program. They're specifically mentioned in the new program, saying that the management of natural resources, the economic and social ecosystem, and local constraints and opportunities linked to the insular dimension make islands the prime location to test, implement new circular approaches. Therefore, they naturally are one of the most important target territories of the tools and practices developed by projects. And it's important to see islands mentioned in this new program. Next slide, please. So the gap can't be bridged without measures and a specific strategy targeted to islands. Again, Claudia mentioned a long list of them. I wanted to end by talking about the Pact of Islands and the action plan, which I think is, Mr. Assonoitis told me the other day, I think it's a mature period enough to talk about this. After so many years of discussing, maybe we can finally talk about this pact. And I think it's encouraging development. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, when was it? I forgot when it was. Yeah, the long-term view on rural areas, which has been published last year by the European Commission, which I think sets an inspiring precedent for finally setting a reference framework to shape a similar one for the island strategy and the action plan. I think it's encouraging. And having said this, I'd like to focus on two Interreg-Med projects implemented by consortia to which INSULEUR is taking part, and the lessons we learned through them with regard to cohesion and entrepreneurship in islands. I'm going to go fast on this. The first one was the blue crowdfunding that, we can go to the next slides. We talked about it earlier during the preparatory meeting. Next one, please. Okay, the figures, the consortium, the general objective as well. Okay, so why is this project was relevant to what we're discussing now? It's because it targets SMEs, and entrepreneurship is about SMEs. It also targets the blue economy sector, and it's a sector which, again, has challenges and handicaps for the islands, but also is a sector with, as I said, huge potential for the islands of the EU. The target area of this project is the Med area. We said that the total population of EU islands is close to 20 million. In this project, there are close to 200 EU inhabited islands with a population of 12 million out of these 20 million total. And it represents countries of Greece, Italy, France, Spain, Cyprus, Malta, and Croatia. So this is why I think it's totally coherent with what we're discussing. Next slide, please. So we noticed during this project the high interest of SMEs and of insular SMEs as well to participate to the capacity building on crowdfunding that we were proposing to them. We had a lot of participants, 600 participants in total, out of which 302 were coming from SMEs. 6 blue crowdfunding focal points were created in countries with islands. A blue crowdfunding cluster for business support institution was created as well. But in all these positive points for EU islands, we also had a few lessons learned on the other side of this project, which were the negative ones, which could be addressed by cohesion policy. Yeah, next slide, please. And we're talking about still very limited knowledge on alternative finance in insular regions and in the south of Europe in particular, lack of maturity of crowdfunding in the south of Europe. And indeed, the majority of the campaigns that we tried to implement failed to reach the targeted amounts because of this. The diversified regulatory system and legal framework, we talked about it, and the lack of the pan-European common set of rules and licensing requirements, which hinder the development of crowdfunding. So, what was pointed out by the project to the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Seville in the last days was the opinion that it is fundamental for the crowdfunding sector to have more relevance as a funding tool in the future of EU policies. And in the same line, the transnational position paper on complementarity of civic crowdfunding with ESI funds developed by the project, which aims at explicitly including match funding through civic crowdfunding initiatives in the text of the coming EESC fund regulations, as to promote the implementation of such new financial schemes and facilitate the widespread diffusion of its benefits in all European territories. And this is what I think this project has taught us about crowdfunding, and we can say a few words also about another EU project.
Yes, before giving the floor to Marina, just to say that, access in finance is one, big problem for insular SME, and this can be, said by also the entrepreneurs coming from Ireland. If they have, access to banks, then to loans from banks, it's not always the case. And we should, find other ways, let's say, to have access to this finance. One of them is the crowdfunding, a new tool. We will see if it is, efficient. But anyway, we will try, in Insular to find, other solutions than conventional ones. I give the floor now to Marina, just for 5 minutes, please, for the Compose Plus.
I will try to sum up all the relevant lessons learned. As we can see on the screen, we are going to discuss, to see a few things about how Compose Plus project has contributed to insular business environment with reference to European cohesion policy. So we can see a few things about the project budget, the duration. It's about to finish, the project comes to its end. The partnership consists of 7 met countries with disparities, and as we can see from the GDP per capita, all the partners show disparities, which is the main principle of the cohesion policy instrument to work. So, for instance, GDP ranges from 33 in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina to 94 in the case of Italy. So, a scenario of keeping growing disparities in the implementation areas, we think that they may result in further inequalities in the future, and that is not the case in the Compose Plus project. As we can see from the general objective, the project aims at increasing the share of renewable energy sources in the energy mix of both rural and insular areas, and tries to decrease the disparities amongst the areas of implementation. So, some few things about the project activities, how these disparities can be decreased through, of course, exchanging information activities, because visibility actions help all the projects to extend their impact and improve their sustainability. Evaluation of the institutional and administrative needs based on socioeconomic, cultural, and micro-location characteristics. Of course, the updating of the Compose tool, that was mainly the main contributor for this. The only contributor was the Technical University of Crete that assisted, that upgraded the toolbox. Training and capacity building for experts, decision makers, and train the trainers in order to upgrade the capacity to help to assist all the policy makers and decision makers and planners as well to mature the projects in renewable energy sources and energy efficiency plans. So, what are the lessons learned? We have to answer a few questions. Why it is a cohesion policy, first of all, how the Compose Plus project delivers results to the Europe 2020, which is mainly connected with the cohesion policy instrument, which are the thematic priorities that connects Compose Plus with the cohesion policy, how Compose Plus has contributed to access to finance issues that crowdfunding also has concentrated on, how Compose Plus has improved SME skills, and how this project has supported SMEs with reference to cohesion policy. So, the answers. We talked about disparities. So, as we have already referred to, through Compose Plus project, disparities between partners are reduced, and we focus on economic, social, and territorial development in order, with respect to energy transition, in order to get more balanced. So, for both public but also SMEs. Smart, sustainable growth, which in combination with digitalization is the mainstream for the new programming period. So the Compose Plus toolbox supports policymakers and SMEs to mature the projects towards the clean energy transition. The connection with the 4 thematic priorities is, we are talking about research and innovation, since there is a linkage between research centers and chambers of commerce within the project, communication technology, competitiveness, and transition. So, more specifically about how Compose Plus has contributed to access to finance issues. Within the project, there was a survey focusing on the problems that SMEs are facing about, and key challenges were highlighted. First of all, lack of information. This should be bear in mind in order to find out solutions to support SMEs, to have access to the information needed in order to take advantage of the programs that fund SMEs' activities. And they need more simplification of the territorial financing tools. Capacity building workshop during the project, over 35 workshops took place, targeting not only the public bodies but also SMEs in specific sectors. And the capacity building was based upon SMEs' needs and funding opportunities. And through the Compose tool, we created a helpful frame for the green transition available to SMEs. And of course, we refer to the linkages between research centers and the business environment in the insular areas. Some examples, we see, for instance, a workshop for the tourism sector and how energy efficiency can be achieved there. We have the forthcoming event about insular members and local communities and how they can use the Compose toolbox in order to succeed balanced energy efficiency, and another one for the ports and focus as well in insular communities. Next, please. So, what's next? What about the cohesion policy, the new programming period? We refer to the Intermed program that it firstly refers to the insular areas and how they should be faced for the implementation, for the funding opportunities that we can give to insular areas, but in general, the approach seems to be the same without giving any additional characteristic to the insular areas. Cohesion policy pays particular attention to European regions that face severe and permanent geographical or demographic challenges, but we think that the classic architecture of the cohesion policy instruments should change, and focusing more on insular business sectors' needs as they face peculiar disadvantages in terms of development. Next, please. And what the project has shown, all of the stakeholders are interested in participating in energy transition projects or energy efficiency, basically focusing on energy efficiency in buildings or in solar energy plants. And can we have? And as we can see, SMEs are mostly interested in implementing projects in energy efficiency in buildings, in solar energy, and in biofuels in the future. So there are peculiar needs, there are peculiar characteristics. Cohesion policy may support insular areas and business environment, and there were specific lessons learned by the implementation of the project Compose Plus.
Thank you both, Marina and Irini, for this, very interesting, interventions on these two projects. I know that CRPM also participates in other projects, Interreg Med, so with the same aims. These, are, let's say, till now, the requests made by islands, either regions or SME or business community. Let's now move to the second, let's say, the second session, where we will have I mean, the responses of the European institutions on our requests. Our requests, I know, are passionate. Let's wait, I mean, what the European institutions say, I mean, in more real terms, if I can say, put like that. So I give the floor to, yes, please go there if you want, Lina Konstantinopoulou, Policy Director in Eurochambers, and we are waiting for our friends in islands to, let's say, respond to our requests. Lina, you have the moderation floor.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. So thank you very much. My name is Lina Konstantinopoulou, the Policy Director at Eurochambers. A short comment on who is Eurochambers, the European Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And some of the insular, of course, members are, of course, members of Eurochambers. And so I'm deeply honored to be invited as moderator in this event. No, and on another note, I think it is very important to say that Eurochambers can also act as a multiplier effect on the challenges and needs towards the insular, let's say, demands and advocacy messages. I would like to point out 3 instances where we have been collaborating quite a lot. The first one was related to the need of ensuring the insular challenges and requirements, not only towards the EU Cohesion Fund, but also the link to the Recovery and Resilience Fund, because this is one of the very important elements that we should not forget, that in order for twin transition to be implemented, we have also into our available hands also the budget of the Recovery and Resilience Fund. So we need to, for sure, use it also for insular needs and challenges. And there we can see a lot of interesting also activities like training, skills, and other areas. And the second point is with respect to the tourism transition pathways that you mentioned, that Eurochambers and also Insular had also been able to provide a position with respect also to our needs into this perspective. So we are more than happy also to share this type of information as additional point to the agenda today. Now, we all know that there are quite a lot of geopolitical tensions and the war, and we have heard, of course, from the previous speakers on the challenges that companies have after the COVID pandemic, and especially, of course, with the war in Ukraine, the energy costs. And, of course, this panel will also focus on a lot of activities that are happening. So we will firstly hear from Mr. Vincent Lina, the team leader of DG Regio G1 from the European Commission, where he's going to update us on initiatives by DG Grow and how cohesion policy will support the insular enterprises. Thank you. Mr. Vincent Lina? Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. No, I had to wait for the button to be activated. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for this invitation and this possibility to join you today, even if I have to apologize that I'm only able to join you virtually. I think that in the previous interventions, many different things were highlighted. Maybe I start with a reaction to a point that Stefano made in his speech, and that highlighted the need for cohesion policy to take into account the very different situations that we have across Europe and across the different regions. He highlighted the importance of regionality, of taking a differentiated approach. And this is, of course, something that is sort of hardwired into the cohesion policy approach. Cohesion policy recognizes that we are not made up of 27 member states only, but that we have hundreds of regions with a very particular and unique circumstances and challenges, and also opportunities. And the objective of cohesion policy is, of course, to support all these regions and territories to develop to their best potential. And this is why for cohesion policy, we have this relatively complicated setup where support is channeled not through directly managed instruments, but through shared management. And indeed hundreds of national and regional and Interreg programs. It makes the system complex, but it also makes a system that allows to respond very specifically to the situation we find in different places across Europe. And of course, we have many examples, of course, where we have specifically, where we have programs that specifically cover islands. Obviously for the island member states like Malta and Cyprus, but also for islands which are big islands and which they have their own operational programs. Just to give, the Canary Islands, the Baleares, Madeira, the Azores, Crete. We have, of course, individual programs for the French island outermost regions. And that's a very good starting point, of course, for having EU-funded programs in place that are tailored to the very specific situation that you find in these island locations. For smaller islands, of course, and one of the previous speakers mentioned this, is that not all islands are the same, and that you have huge differences also between the different islands. For smaller islands that are part of a larger program area, so that they don't have their own programs, that is, of course, very important that during the programming exercise, also the needs of these islands are properly reflected when the negotiations go on for the program. Several speakers made a reference to COVID. I think that was a challenge, of course, for all of us, and that was a challenge that was particularly felt also in many or all island regions. I think we moved very quickly when the need arose to address the challenges posed by COVID and help regions to address the challenges posed by COVID. We had the two iterations, the two installments of the Corona Response Investment Initiative and REACT-EU. And these were, of course, tools that allow to very quickly and flexibly support regions as they were struggling through these, especially through the initial stages of COVID. Now, hopefully, we are seeing the end of the tunnel, and it becomes very much about recovering from COVID, but also using the opportunities as they arise now for delivering the green and smart transitions and for achieving also sustainable and maybe smart transformation of economies. Several speakers mentioned the islands for whom tourism is a principal economic sector, and here we have maybe now opportunities not only to transform that sector towards more sustainability, but also to help islands develop, to diversify their economic basis. Cohesion policy covers basically supports regional development, and supporting regional development has many different aspects, touches on different policy areas and different sectors, and in each of these areas, cohesion policy support is in principle available, whether it be research, innovation, supporting business and SMEs in particular, driving forward the digitization, environmental investments in the energy sector, in the transport sector, which was, of course, mentioned as very relevant for the islands because of their particular situation when it comes to connectivity. Cohesion policy is available to support the development of skills or the improvement of social public services. So the scope is big, and the challenge at the moment is, of course, for us to negotiate with member states and with regions good program for the next period. So programs that help them with emerging from COVID, that help them with the green and digital transition, and that help them also with the local economic transformation. Island desks, I think the idea of island desk was mentioned. First, one point I would make is that already in Reggio, we have many island desks in the sense that we have people following, of course, the programs for these big islands, and also for programs that cover not only islands. Of course, the specific needs of the islands are considered during the programming exercise. We are aware of obligations in this regard that also stem directly from Article 174 of the Treaty for the Function of the European Union. When it comes to supporting businesses, we have a very comprehensive framework in place that will cover business support, access to finance and different forms of financing that will help them with improving skills and will help regions to trigger the creation of startups or the scale-up of startups. So I think from our side, we have a very comprehensive framework in place. There is the money that is available from the structural funds, which then will act also in sort of complementarity and synergy with the resources that are, for instance, available through the Recovery and Resilience Facility or the Connecting Europe Facility and Horizon and other instruments. And the challenge now is really to have good negotiations with the member states, with the regions, to make sure that in each of the cases, the resources can be used to the best of their potential. So maybe I stop here. Probably I missed some points that were raised for me and where you would like to have a reaction, but I'm sure that you will come back to me with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lina. I think we will proceed with the presentations and the interventions of the other speakers, and then we can have some time for questions and points raised by our participants. I would like now to give the floor to Antoinette Maupertuis, President of Corsica Assembly, Rapporteur of the opinion Strengthening Cohesion Policy in line with the Article 174 TFU. Thank you.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we can see you as well.
Okay, perfect, because this morning I had some problems to be connected. Okay, perfect. So dear President, dear representatives of the Commission, dear participants also, thank you so much to invite me. Excuse me for not being physically present in Brussels, and also for my English, which is not very fluent. I'm in charge of an opinion at the Committee of the Regions, focusing on the Article 174, which recognizes the handicaps of various regions, islands, of course, but also mountains, rural areas, and regions with low demographic density. But maybe more interesting is the fact that in 2017, I had in charge an opinion presented at the Committee of Regions focusing on entrepreneurship in islands. A lot of things have been said during this seminar. Nowadays, I think that the question is to know how to foster cohesion policy by fostering cohesion of islands. And to do that, we need to have new specific tools and maybe some adaptations of the new cohesion program from 2021 to 2028. We have various problems to deal, and I think that only focusing on or advocating only the objective 5 of the new PO would not be enough. Islanders and specifically SMEs need new concrete tools in order to better be connected to mainland and in order to have the same territorial cohesion as other SMEs in Europe. First of all, I think that one main point is the question of indicators. If you have not the good indicators, you cannot implement the good policy, design and implement the good policy. So focusing only on GDP indicators is not, according to me, the good solution. And maybe we can speak about this. We need specific indicators that could reflect the specificity of islands as a complement to GDP. In the opinion on Article 174 is one line I want to defend, as this has been yet defended in the past by Insular Association, of course. I think that we need also to complete the vision of SMEs tissue in islands by the regional competitiveness index. It's very important for two things. The first one is that, as you know, the use of cohesion policy funds will be associated normally to a territorial assessment. So if we want to implement this territorial assessment, we have to have the right indicators and not only a GDP indicator. And the second one is the fact that we want to, we think that it's necessary to have an island proofing, as we have a rural proofing, for instance. So this has to be promoted, according to us, by the Commission. And in order to have these islands proofing for each policy measures, we have to have the good indicators. The second claim, if I could say like that, will be the defense of an island desk. The representative of the Commission spoke about this demand, which is a recurrent demand coming from the islands networks and lobbies. CPMR, for instance, but also Committee of Regions, Syrica at the European Parliament. I advocated in the opinion on entrepreneurship in Ireland in 2017 the implementation of a task force and a help desk, one-stop shop, you call it as you want, at the DG Regio, in order to better first coordinate all the policies devoted to islands, SMEs, but also transport, agriculture, and so on. Because, as I said, and other actors and stakeholders say that also, islands have to be analyzed as a global system, and each policy, the various policy, have to be coordinating together. Speaking about SMEs, without speaking about transport and without speaking about energy, is not the good manner to face the challenges islands have to support, and as recognized by the Article 174. This kind of organizational innovation, a task force or a help desk, these would be very interesting also for islands and for SMEs, because we have only one point to ask and only one entry at the Commission, and this could be very practical for islands. Another point which is very, very important, it's the necessity to implement new rules for state aids for islands case. We know very well that these kinds of adaptation exist for outermost regions, and these regulations also have been alleviated during the COVID crisis. This could be also a very good thing, because we have, as this has been said during the seminary, you have very important challenges to face. We have problems in transport, we have problems in energy, in connectivity. Of course, connectivity nowadays is as important as accessibility. And so if we need local actors and local institutions, if we need to invest more and more in transport infrastructure, in development of new routes, of connectivity infrastructures, of course we need modification of regulation, of the regulation on state aid. I know the case maybe more of the situation of French islands. The regional aid guidelines are the first set of state aid rules that have been recently revised following the announcement of the European Green Deal, of course, and the European industrial and digital strategies. It's It's important to remember that as far as I do understand, ever since before the adoption of the revised regional state aid guidelines in France, outermost regions have been benefiting from an exemption according to Article 107, paragraph 3, alinéa A of the treaty. For instance, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Guyane, La Réunion, Mayotte, and Saint Martin will continue to be eligible for aid as A areas. In these areas, the maximum aid intensities for large enterprises vary between 40 and 70, depending on the GDP per capita of the respective outermost regions. When the territorial just transition plan in the context of the Just Transition Fund regulation will be in place, an increase of the maximum aid intensity in the future just transition areas will be applied, as specified in the revised regional aid guidelines for A area. Unfortunately, for Corsica, Corsica has not been identified as a beneficiary of the Just Transition Fund and cannot thus benefit from the exemptions. And other islands in Mediterranean Sea, I think so. We think that a much wider scope of the Just Transition Fund is needed to support the transition in territories, insular territories that are highly dependent on fossil fuels, as we can say nowadays with the inflation we have to face. And this afternoon I will have a meeting on this point. Well, to conclude on the state aid, the state aid framework should take into account the natural and permanent characteristics, constraints, especially for the sectors that are strategically important for islands, such as transport, energy, and digital connectivity. In my view, a system of operating assistance for islands businesses to offset higher transport costs should be adopted. The approval and exemption for such aid should be the same as for the outermost regions and sparsely populated areas. And I would like to precise that doing that for our island, which are not outermost regions, will not hurt or harm the status of outermost regions, of course, which are protected by Article 3049 of the treaty. Specifically concerning the energy sector, there should be a specific fund to finance energy transition in islands and ad hoc exemptions, even if I know that there is specific programs put in motion by the DG NR, NSULEUR program, for instance. So, but we have to do more, as islands are really very interesting laboratories for renewable energies. A last point I would like to defend in my opinion is the question of the de minimis regulation. Remember that it has been possible to cumulate the aid under the temporary framework implemented during the COVID crisis with the de minimis regulation. But this will come to an end, and it will be worth thinking at how the de minimis regulation could be improved once it will be open for changes. This seems a small thing, but it's very important for economic actors and specifically for SMEs. It's very important. Here's the key aspects I will defend in my opinion, and of course I totally agree with the recommendations made by Deputy Yunus Omarjee in his last report presented at the Commission Regi of the European Parliament. I totally agree with him, because we need an insular pact as it exists a rural pact or a urban pact, of course, and it's very important nowadays to have a specific strategy for islands. I think that it's really times, and it's very important to have this kind of meetings together, knowing that the growth, but also the sustainable development will be promoted not only by institutions, but moreover by those which are producing every day, and those which are employing people, and I think about SMEs in particular, enterprises of course, but SMEs in particular in our small economies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mapertua. I think the points that you have raised are quite important, and I think we will have some time later on to discuss a bit more in detail together with the Commission and, of course, with our participants. Now we have a third intervention by Mr. Ioannis Vardakastanis, the Vice President of the European Economic Social Committee.
Thank you, and to say from the beginning, I'm the Vice President of the Eco section of the European Economic and Social Committee, not of the Economic and Social Committee. But the most important thing is that I come from an island also, from the island of Zakynthos of Greece. And I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to speak in this very important workshop. Europe's islands are a very important part of Europe, and they need to be considered and treated equally, like the mainland. The 8th Cohesion report recently published by the European Commission has showed that since 2001, while less developed regions in Eastern Europe have been catching up with the Western European Union, so to say, at the same time, many middle income and less developed regions, especially in southern and southwestern EU, including islands, have suffered from an economic stagnation or decline. Convergence between member states has accelerated, but internal regional disparities within the fast-growing member states have increased. COVID-19 has contributed to the deepest post-war recession, and the impact was even greater on Southern Europe and islands, which have been dependent on tourism, for example. Let me stress the following. Islands suffer from a number of structural handicaps, which often result in difficult conditions for carrying out businesses, for example. The EESC strongly believes that key policy areas such as the single market, competition policy, transport policy, rural development policy and fisheries policy, as well as European initiatives and programs supporting education, training, youth, and sport policies must be applied with a greater degree of flexibility when it comes to island economies and societies. People with disabilities and more generally disadvantaged people must be given specific attention as they tend to suffer more than others the effects of the problems being faced by islands. The EESC considers it especially that all efforts to assist islands should give priority to providing access to public services, promoting sustainable growth, and fostering full employment, competitiveness, and cohesion in European islands, especially after the COVID-19 crisis and the problems that have become even bigger and more intense. The high cost of transport and lack of connections with other territories constitute a major problem for island territories. Such a problem needs to be recognized and approached in a flexible manner aimed at allowing island economies to survive and flourish. Although the legal framework allows member states to organize public services to ensure regular connections with island territories, there is, in our opinion, a need to review what the actual impact of this measure has been, especially with COVID-19. We have experienced the loneliness of the islands and how difficult has been, in many cases, the access, for example, to vaccines. Another aspect that adversely affects the competitiveness of some islands' economy is that related to the monoculture economies, where certain insular economies specialize in one or just very few economic fields, for example, tourism, or have a limited economic activity due to their small size. You already spoke how tourism has been affected from the COVID-19. EU cohesion policy is the most sustainable policy for islands and must be an integral part of a European investment strategy with a strong territorial approach aimed at empowering each region with necessary tools to enhance their competitiveness, etc. It must lead to economic and structural transformation, securing a resilient base in each region based on their own strength and capacities. The EESC regrets, however, that cohesion policy still does not offer a comprehensive solutions approach to the challenges facing specific areas with structural and permanent disadvantages, for example, very low population density, islands, mountain regions, etc., mentioned in Article 174 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union. The EESC believes that a new mechanism should be developed that allows these areas to effectively tackle their specific and complex challenges. This cannot remain the sole competence of the national authorities. Hence, the EESC believes that cohesion policy must encourage cooperation between the Commission and the Member States and their regional and local stakeholders in the way their specific territories are addressed. This includes islands as well. We need to build synergies with other regions with specific similar characteristics like mountain areas and sparsely populated regions, and all united with one voice. We should, I say we should, coming from an island, claim the maximum, more funds, the use priority in relation to sparsely populated areas and outermost regions must be to strengthen the links that connect them with mainland Europe and their citizens' sense of belonging to the European project. I could say more, but I think the message is clear. Island regions and the other regions with similar characteristics should form a very strong alliance and demand from the member states they belong and from the EU institutions more attention, not in words, but in deeds, in funding and in practical solutions to overcome their problems. Thank you very much for your attention, and I should apologize. I'm speaking from Germany, and I need to really run to another meeting here in Frankfurt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vardakastanis, and I'm really sorry for the error in your title. Now I would like to go back to the discussion before opening the panel, before opening our panel for questions to our audience. I would like to have the possibility by Mr. Lina from the European Commission to prepare his reply with respect to the two interventions that we have had from Mrs. Mavroghetiwa and also from Mr. Vardakastanis, because there were some very important points raised from the opinion, and I think it will be great to have the Commission's reply to those points. Thank you.
So I found all the right buttons. Yes, indeed. Thank you for giving me the floor again. And I'm trying to address some of the points that have been raised. Maybe the point on the island desk. I mean, that's a message that has been understood. I mean, we have, of course, various places inside of Regio where the island dimension is very prominent. This is certainly true for the people dealing directly with island programs, and of course in certain geographical units inside of Regio also the concerns of the islands are very prominent. There's a lot of awareness, for instance, in the unit dealing with Greece or the idea, and I think it's a recurring proposal to set up a dedicated island desk is taken note of, and I'm sure this will be discussed again also within DG Regio. For the state aid issue, well, as you will be aware, of course, the state aid rules apply in full to the support that is provided by the structural funds. It's different from the directly managed instruments where there are state aid derogations, but for us, the rules apply whenever cohesion fund or ERDF support is provided to an investment. The state aid issues themselves are, of course, primarily an issue for the colleagues within DG competition, but we are also involved when a revision of the rules or monitoring of the rules for state aid is being considered in the Commission. The AIDS cohesion report, indeed, prior to this meeting, I was looking through it. It's 350 pages that tries to paint, of course, a picture of what the state of play is for cohesion across Europe. There are many different sort of dimensions to look at in this report and addressed by this report. Probably there are limits also to how much each of the dimensions can be explored in the report. And I think part of I'm not the expert on the AIDS cohesion report inside of Reggio, but I think partly you have this issue, of course, that was highlighted by one of the previous speakers, saying that the regions themselves, the islands themselves, of course, are hugely different in their nature. There are some islands which are member states and is covered as such also by statistics that would be presenting a picture at national level. Then you have islands that are not two regions, that are regions that would also be covered by those statistics that cover that dimension. And then, of course, there are many much smaller islands which wouldn't be, where the situation wouldn't be captured by any particular indicator, but where these very small islands would be captured only within the framework of the statistics that are available, for instance, for their region or for their member state. In the programs, of course, there's always an opportunity also for the member states or for the regions to make this differentiation, for instance, between the islands covered by the program and mainland regions covered by a program. There's a possibility to identify in the programs both common output indicators and also result indicators that would also be able to capture, for instance, ambitions that a program might have when it comes to addressing, for instance, disparities in the development between islands and between mainland regions. So the possibility for the member states or regions is there, and it can be included in the programs. Then there was an issue, I'm just looking at my issue. The point was made that cohesion policy must encourage close cooperation between the EU, between national, regional authorities, and also the local level. And I think this is something that is clearly hardwired into the design of cohesion policy, with a shared management approach, with a multi-level governance and partnership approach that we have there, and which is also reinforced through territorial tools. I think one of the earlier speakers referenced the ITIs in this respect, which is also a tool that would allow and does allow to reinforce the role that sub-regional actors play in the implementation of cohesion policy. State cohesion single market. Yes, I think at least as far as a question touched on, or the speakers touched on issues that are under the remit of DG Regio, I try to address them shortly. I think there are many issues that are, of course, also relevant for colleagues in other commission services, like the state aid issues, also like the issues that were mentioned regarding public service obligations for transport connections. But I would leave that to my colleagues to respond to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lina, for your quick reply, let's say, to the points raised by our panel speakers. I think I would like at this point maybe to check whether we have any questions in the chat box. Do we have any questions? Because Is it possibility to check the chat box, Mr. Meleas? No, there are no questions from the chat box. Okay, and are there any interventions from the audience? Yes, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Athanasios Zlatoudis. Mr. Athanasios Zlatoudis, I think you're first.
Yes, now it's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, it will be great if you can just mention your name and also where is your organization.
Greetings from Skiathos Island, Greece. I'm member of the board of directors of Magnesia Chamber of Commerce and from AOIN, the join of...
We cannot see the screen, of course.
Is it clear? Sorry, the connection is not so good.
Okay, but we cannot see you, but I think it's okay. I think we can hear you very well.
Can you open... Do I have to do something for the camera? Because... sorry.
I think more important.
Now?
Okay,
Yeah,
yes, we can see you now. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the ability to participate in today's meeting, having among us all the major stakeholders related to, interested by, and being responsible for the actually realization of EU strategy, insular strategy for the future. Having in mind the three components of European cohesion policy, I will place more attention to the territorial one. So when we are talking about the necessity to have different policies as they arrive from the different characteristics of the island, as many participants have mentioned up to now, the outmost region of EU have such a status. From the constitutional treaty of EE, indeed. Therefore, we don't try to create something new. We try to expand, exactly in the mentality of EU cohesion, the same characteristics to the same territorial territories who need that. Also, I would like to mention that the discussion for marine spatial planning in Greece have started already. Being together with all Chamber of Commerces, and next year is expected to be for public audience in the Greek Parliament. So, although we are talking about entrepreneurship and territory, we should see how these tools can be binded together in order to create the foundation for moving ahead. Speaking of that, the GNC is the oldest maritime route, talking about transportation, but also an outmost region of EU, indeed, in the same time, because we must not only have the geographical distance from the center, from Brussels, but the actual time that somebody needs to reach a different part of EU borders, and also the difficulties in doing business there, as the component part of this discussion is today. So, since there cannot be such a planning, marine spatial planning in Greece, without bearing all the contacts with the EU legislation as a country state, the specific like UNCLOS that we are obliged to follow, and also the neighbors. What we have as a best practice from different parts of the EU right now is the existence of macro region, as the late one was established in the Adriatic and Ionian Sea. Therefore, everything that we have heard up to now, of course they are interrelated, but also can be a process of moving ahead to create a new macro region binding Bulgaria, Greece, and Cyprus, because all of these things that we have talked about today, they are in this very space. We need to have a process of cooperation with all the neighboring countries, and indeed is something that will benefit the EU in the long run, not only the islanders, because of the great turnover that takes place in all the insular territory of the EU, and especially in this part of Aegean Sea and Eastern Mediterranean area. I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you very much for everything that we have heard up to now. And we are here to assist you in finding the right tools and the right processes, as we have heard up to now, to go ahead with an effective and efficient insular policy for the future of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zlatoudis. I understand that you don't have a specific question, but you just wanted to make an intervention. Thank you for that. I would like now to give the floor to Miss Marie Maupertuis. Thank you. Maupertuis.
It's okay, don't worry. My accent is so terrible that no problem. Well, I totally agree with what this person has said right now. I think really that cohesion policy is for us, for islands and SMEs in islands, a chance. And I totally agree with Commissaire Ferreira saying we have not to harm cohesion policy. It is a chance, really a chance for us. It could open the way to diversification, because as this has been said, we are too much specialized usually in tourism, and this is a vulnerability because as we saw during the COVID crisis, we have all our eggs in the same bag. So it's a little bit complicated from that point of view, and there is a lot of risk, macroeconomic risk. But I think also that cohesion policy alone for our island is not enough. I yet said that. I think that we have really to articulate cohesion policy measures, and not only objective 5, other objectives, greener economy, more intelligent economy, and so on. It is very important to coordinate, to articulate the various phases of the cohesion policy and the PO for each region, defended by our member states. This is very important to have the support of our member state, and to coordinate this with competition, with the question of the competition, because when we are in an island, it is not a pure competition model. Reality as an island is really different. We have monopoles, we have oligopoles, and this is why we have super costs in our activities, economic activities. And we have also articulate this with transport costs, as said by the previous orator. So it's fundamental, according to me, to have a global vision articulating the various strands of public policy, of EU policies. Concerning the idea of the macro regions, it's a good idea, of course, and on the West Mediterranean Sea, we have a project nowadays debated in the Commission COTER of the Committee of Regions, and the rapporteur is Mr. Droboslavic. I'm shadow rapporteur with Ms. Altunian from Région Sud in France. So the idea is to implement a macro region articulating various multi-governance levels in order to give more sense of our investment in the managing of environment in particular. So I think that macro regions is a cooperation tool adapted for the protection of environmental assets, for instance, for our common good, which is the Mediterranean Sea. Maybe it will be more difficult to manage private activities. Maybe, I don't know, I hope so, but maybe it could be different because the rules and the behaviors are different in the private side. But nonetheless, and I want to conclude with that, when you are in a territory where you have geographical discontinuity, European Commission and our member states together have to build continuity, territorial continuity, with specific networks of transport, with specific networks of connectivity, of course, and taking into account, of course, the super costs our SMEs have to support. It's very important, but I trust the Commission and overall all the stakeholders and all the lobbies in order to promote the idea that islands are also a chance for Europe. It's very important to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. I think this is the time also to close this panel debate. Thank you again to Mr. Vincent Lénard, Ms. Maupertuis, and Mr. Parzakastanis for the intervention. And I would like now to give the floor back to our president to provide his final concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lina, for your moderation. Thank you also, George, for your earlier moderation. I want to be going again to thank all the participants in this meeting, but thank you all for being here with us this morning. As we have seen, there have been various and a lot of views that have been expressed. There are also various associations, INSULEUR and all the others, that are putting forward policies, that are proposing changes in policies, which will help address the specificities of islands. It is my opinion that there must be a really concerted effort so that these various voices address the problems of cohesion, the problems of accessibility, the problems related to common indicators, the problems related to state aid. We must see that these opinions are delivered in a unified way. And so my last appeal, I appeal for unity. I appeal for union. Where there is unity, there is strength. We are very small realities, you know. Islands are very small realities, and the chambers of the islands are even smaller realities. But the entrepreneurship that there is in us should help us and should lead us to find ways and means so that our requests can be made stronger. And these can be made stronger only through delivering a unified voice. This will lead, and I augur to all that this will lead for our islands to perform better. Thank you all for being with us today, and we look forward to meet you again very soon. Thank you again.